All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, and we're going to be getting started really shortly. We've got quite a few people trickling in now at this point. So just want to thank you, those of you that are here on time. I appreciate it. And yeah, this is Global App Testing. We'll be starting shortly, so just covering a couple of the housekeeping items. So I apologize in advance. This room is really echoey. This is our first webinar we've done in this room, so it just sounds like a massive echo chamber. So I apologize about that. If you can let us know in the chat that the audio is working okay, that you can hear me. If you can just write a 1 in the chat, that would be fantastic. That way I know at least somebody is listening or can hear us here on that side. If you're not familiar or you're on GoToWebinar, the panel, the chat is right there. You should just be able to get some information in there. I'm going to type, since I don't see anybody telling me that they can hear me. Can anyone hear us? Let's take a look here. Okay. All right, we got questions. Okay. It can hear you. Perfect. Yeah, great. So we've got the questions panel. Awesome. That was also a little test. So that way you can also know where the questions panel is as well. So if you have questions throughout, we're definitely open to hearing your questions as well. So we'll be doing some polls throughout the webinar. So keep an eye out for those as well. And yeah, just really excited to have everybody here. And like I said, we'll be starting in just a moment. But for those of you that can't join the whole time, we're going to be sending out a copy of the slides. We'll be sending a recording, and then we'll be available for questions and answers as well. I tend to talk really fast, and that's the American in me. So if you have, if something's not coming out right, or you just are not sure what I'm even talking about, like I said, pop it in questions, throw it in the chat, let us know, and we can jump on and get those answered for you. So I'm going to get started. It looks like everyone's still trickling in, but we'll get going. So today, this is me. I'm Nick Roberts. I'm the head of research and marketing for Global App Testing. And prior to joining Global App Testing, I was at Defense Storm, which is a cybersecurity startup in Seattle. And then prior to that, worked at GoDaddy and Cox Communications and Virginia Mason. And I own my own business as well. And so I've been kind of on all different sides of the coin, so to speak, from the perspective of working in different types of technological industries, and I've had to deal with QA from all different sides of the coin, both from the product side and on the website and marketing side. And joining me today is Fahim Sashid. Fahim, why don't you go and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Nick. Hey, everyone. Glad to be on this webinar to give a brief overview about myself. So I'm currently a growth manager as part of the QA Ops team. So QA Ops, it might be the first time some of you are hearing about QA Ops, essentially trying to help companies become quality-first organizations. And I know we're going to get into a bit more of that during this webinar and also with further material too. Prior to this role, I was also part of the commercial team with Global App Testing. So I've been with the company for a pretty long time, pretty much since day one. Seen it grow from zero to where we are now with employees all around the world. So I've been part of different departments in this organization. So from sales to operations to customer support to account management. I've seen all sides, all coins of this organization as it grows, and now we're really excited about growing the QA Ops movement.
Awesome. It's good to have you, Fahim. Thanks for joining me on the webinar. And I know you got a ton of insight from onboarding some pretty epic customers in your time frame and helping them improve their QA. And really, that's what we're here to talk about today, which is the whole don't ignore QA. This is tackling QA without breaking the bank. And so this basically this whole concept and this whole idea for this webinar came from the fact that I joined Global App Testing about 9 to 10 months ago, and really got involved with kind of the companies that were joining the movement here at Global App Testing and QA Ops, and really kind of diving into wow, this is a lot of companies start with this really small startup stage, or they kind of ignore QA, and there's this misconceptions that we'll get into a little bit later about kind of what it takes to really tackle QA in your organization. So we're going to learn in the next 60 minutes, you're going to go through our exact strategy on how to tackle QA without breaking the bank. And don't forget, at the end of the webinar, we're going to be sending out slides. We'll be giving out copies of the upcoming, of our new white paper, and also an infographic which is going out in a couple weeks, talking about what CTOs need to know about the state of QA. Before we get started though, I just wanted to make sure I have your full attention. So I know there's distractions all around us, but the strategy that we're about to share really can change how you build products in your organization. And we really don't want you to miss the crucial steps. So if you can, please make a commitment, stay focused. Can you do that for yourself? Close out of Facebook, stop checking your email, turn off your cell phone, stop swiping right on Tinder, whatever it is that you're doing right now. Just turn off all distractions, because I know this is going to be great. So who is GoldUp Testing? And what do we do? Well, we reduce the time and effort spent on testing your apps. We work with some pretty amazing, massive companies. Virgin Media, you may have heard of them, Facebook, Spotify, Microsoft, Dropbox, King, just some incredible companies. A lot of companies we can't name because we're under NDA, but I'll make allusions to who they are and you can guess, and that isn't against the rules. I don't think.
We'll run with it anyway.
Yeah, we'll run with it anyway. I don't think that's against the rules, which is great. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of have him talk a little bit about Facebook and kind of that whole story, because I think this is really exciting, kind of what we do with Facebook and how we even got started with them.
Yeah, sure. So I think the story around, or at least engaging with Facebook, was particularly interesting with us. I remember them calling us at around 11 to 11:30 p.m. at night. I remember it was me actually on the call that day. And so I received that call, and I got this call from a US number. I picked it up, thinking maybe it was just like, one of these spam numbers or like a wrong number or something like that. Like, it was pretty late, right? So I picked this up, and it was someone who I got introduced to prior at Facebook, and they just were just like, hey, we've got this this really crazy deadline where we're looking to test about 500 apps within about 6 weeks. Can you guys help us? And they were like, we want to get started probably in about 48 hours. What could you guys do? And so I obviously was like, okay then. First thing I did, obviously, had spoken to the operations team and understood, what do we have to essentially do to make this happen? They were so impressed with the plan we put together. They were like, oh, so that number we told you about 500, it's actually going to be 5,000.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of we had to 10x our plans then, really had to completely change what the initial plan was that we'd proposed to them based on the numbers. But I think that's what we've really done, and I think it demonstrated, and we obviously executed it really, really well, and I think the team did a tremendous job on that. So it just showed how scalable and how flexible the solution crowdsourced testing and GoldUp testing have really put together here. And then through that, the types of products and services we then provide to them now are much more varied from testing in
Probably a bit different.
Yeah, exactly. Testing in different locations and different devices, and we'll get into a lot of that as well. But the initial interaction was just, can you test 5,000 apps in a few days, a few weeks?
So of course, when Facebook calls and you're a small or early stage startup, you say, yeah, absolutely, yes, definitely, and then you figure out how to operationalize it later. But on the flip side, we work with a lot of other companies as well. Orange Games is a great example of a company that I've been talking to and working with here, and really they're a small games producer in the Netherlands, I think, and they make Governor of Poker, which is a fantastic poker game if you're looking for a good poker game to play on your mobile device. And I work with Dennis, who is the product owner for the Governor of Poker. We were having an interesting chat, and he was talking about kind of how he had originally just allowed his developers to do all the testing, and they were getting pretty poor reviews on the App Store. And they said, and his developers said, well, this is the best it's going to get. The internet connection in whatever countries they were targeting were just poor. It's poor internet connection, low device quality, and this is the quality of the product's going to get. And he just didn't believe that. There was something tugging at the inside of his brain that said that this isn't right. And so he engaged with us, and they've gone from like a 3.1 on their App Store rating up to like 4.8 in a really short period of time. And they're a small team, right? So they just have one or two games that they really focus on. They've got a small development team, and they can't afford a really huge QA team to kind of work on those things. So I just wanted to kind of give you that overview of where the types of customers that we work with, because it's not just huge companies, but small companies as well utilize crowdsourced testing to really revolutionize how they deliver product quality. But we're not really just here to talk about tooting our own horn. We're really talking about kind of why you don't want to bury your head in the sand over QA. And this really came about when I started researching hear kind of what customers were looking for in products and the kinds of things that they were experiencing. So obviously this guy's he thinks he's got it all covered, but really he's falling. But 48% of users are less likely to use an app again if they're unhappy with your app's performance, right? So obviously this is probably for anybody in mobile or web. These statistics aren't things that you're unfamiliar with, but I think it's important to point out that a lot of companies feel like they can separate their brand from their app. And that's actually becoming less and less true every day. And one of the most recent statistics that I found was that 88% of Americans form negative opinions of brands if the brand has a poorly performing app. So when we look at somebody like Virgin Media, or who provides a wide swath of services, like in the UK here, they provide cable, internet, television, home phone service. And when they came to us, they said, we've got a problem with our app, and they didn't realize how closely linked their customer experiences were with the app itself. And people form a negative opinion of your brand if your app doesn't work very well. So you can no longer separate those two. I remember a few years ago that the whole notion of kind of, you were mobile first company, and then you were an app first company, and now really you are an app company. There is no kind of mobile first or mobile web first on that front. Anything you want to say on that, Fine?
I think it's so important to have a native experience across all the different applications. And it's not just native across mobile, but it's native across the customer journey on web, on desktop web, on mobile web, on different types of devices, on different types of versions of those devices. And it's important to have a seamless experience, which we all know that our phone may work, or at least our app may work in the office environment with a perfect Wi-Fi signal, but what we don't know is how the app is performing out in the wild. So here we are in the UK and London, where especially when it comes to Virgin, I go on the tube and then 15 minutes down on my journey, I'm switching between Wi-Fi and then onto 4G, and then I'm onto the work Wi-Fi. There are so many different variations that companies don't take into account, but it's so critical to get that customer experience right, just because of you want people to form those positive experiences on your application and on your company as a whole.
Nice. So that's a good segue actually into, we're going to launch a quick poll. I mentioned this earlier. We're just going to take 2 minutes here. We're just going to have you launch a quick poll. And really this what we're asking here at this point is, what are you struggling with the most on QA? So obviously you've decided to spend an hour with us this morning, so I thank you for doing that. But for most of you got to be struggling on something with QA. And so what I want you to do is just take a quick second, let us know what you're struggling with the most, and that way we can make sure we deliver like a really rock solid experience for you guys here. All right, so we almost have everybody voted here, so we'll just take a few more seconds. And all right, 100% voting. Thank you. I love it when 100% of people vote. Yay! So I'm gonna close the poll, and we're gonna show those results. We're gonna take a look, and we're gonna take a look at the who attended, and we're looking at 14% of people mobile, 14% desktop software, 30% on website. Interesting. I wasn't expecting people to have that much QA problem with their website, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. And 43% QA takes up too much time. We agree. Yeah, we completely agree.
I think I'm surprised about that at all with how people are spending time on QA, and how QA is one of those things where it's so hard to get right.
Yep. Absolutely. And what's really funny about this is that is actually why the company was formed. So a couple of years before the company was formed, the founders were working on something completely different, a completely different product and a completely different service. And they were struggling with QA, and it was just, they were banging their heads at the wall all the time with QA. And they realized that, hey, we're probably not the only ones dealing with this problem. So let's see if we can tackle it. Let's see if we can solve this problem for everybody. So thank you everyone for voting. I appreciate that. So what we find a lot of companies do is that when they're struggling with QA, or when they're just starting up, they typically start off by having their buddies test, or somebody in the organization can test. For them, they'll give a copy of the APK or the IPA file or the website, and they will have members of the organization test the app or website. And initially, obviously, if you're in like an early alpha or early beta, there's nothing wrong with this approach. But as your company and your organization begins to grow, it starts to look like this, right? So you've got maybe 25 of you in the office, 30 of you in the office, and you need everyone to test the most recent version of your app or website. And so what you've done is you've really just taken everybody off task. You've interjected your needs upon them, and you've really gotten into a situation where now you have everyone struggling to get their work done and test, and you just cause a massive inefficiency.
I think one thing I see, whenever I see this this image right here, I always think it's not just the fact that everyone's always busy on their own tasks, is that people also want help on those tasks. So while you're trying to bring them in onto your QA, the work that you need done, they're trying to say, actually, can you just QA this, or can you help me out with this? Everyone always needs help, right? In terms of that bandwidth. But at the same time, if you're pulling in resources which aren't professional expertise on those resources, the opportunity cost for an organization is huge, especially when you're thinking about organizations of 200, 500, 1,000 people plus that have to do this. And we speak to companies all the time who say, whenever our app is about to release, we send a test flight link out to all 500, 600 employees, which sounds crazy.
It's nuts. It's absolutely crazy. And I'm reminded of this, actually. We were actually, you and I, Farm, were at an event, and we were talking to a really large real estate app company here in the UK. They're massive. They're really big. I don't know another way to say it. I can't talk about their name specifically, but let's just say if you're looking for a house in the UK, you've probably used their app or website. And their release process was this. They had a guy, and every time they were ready to release their app, this guy would open up his briefcase or suitcase full of devices. He'd plug them all in. There was 10 to 15 different devices, and he'd power them up and he'd download the most recent version, and then he would just start running through as many different test cases and exploratory tests as possible. And you wouldn't have thought that this mega huge company with their millions of dollars in funding and their millions of dollars worth of revenue plugged into every estate agent here in the UK was operating on this kind of way, but it ends up being kind of the norm. I think nobody starts out wanting to do QA like this. I think it just happens, and that's the process. And the problem is this guy was leaving. He was leaving, right? I mean, they didn't know what to do. No one else had.
And in addition to all that, I remember them saying that this guy, whenever there were specific or unique problems out in specific cities, such as like Manchester or London or Birmingham or areas like this, he would go by train to these locations with his briefcase of devices on the train and carry out some testing, which is just crazy to have the fact that you have to send someone halfway across the UK, hundreds of miles to go about carrying out some testing. And there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, there is, absolutely. And you can imagine how that works if you've got to suddenly go to another country because you're a global company and you've got a briefcase full of devices and cords and going through airport security. I'm sure you're not going to get stopped or anything, right, at that point. They're going to look at you. So really you end up getting less quality, right? So 52% of organizations are struggling to find time to test mobile applications, and that's up 36% from 2015. So this isn't a problem that's like, getting resolved right now, and you're not alone. So I know we talk to a lot of organizations and companies who are like, they feel like they're struggling because they see like Facebook or King, like Candy Crush, and they say, man, they got these awesome apps and they just release them and they're great and they work every time. Because they test them properly.
Yeah,
they put in the right effort, and it is a struggle to find the time to test mobile. 42% of organizations don't have mobile testing experts in-house. I think the estate agent company that I was talking about earlier is a great example of that. This guy with the briefcase full of devices, he wasn't a mobile testing expert. He just drew the short straw, I guess.
Yeah. I think it was an extension as part of the operations team, and I think that's a big mistake that we see across organizations, is that someone tries to tack on or add on QA through the development team or an operations team or a junior or an intern. And it's never really the right strategy because that person doesn't have the right level of understanding, of knowledge, of expertise of what testing an app actually means to find highly critical bugs.
Yep. And then by default, then what happens is we say, okay, let's have the developers test. Let's make the developers test it because they wrote the code, right? They should be responsible for the quality of the code. I just read, I can't remember who it was the other day that said there was a big press release they put out about it, that they had eliminated all QA roles in their organization. They were just going to have the developers do all the testing because they the assumption is that if you wrote the code, it should be good enough, and you're responsible for testing it at that point. But the problem is that as a developer, you can't test all the hardware, software, OS, network operators, and a ton of other combinations in your device, and you just can't do it. And I think that making the developers required to do that puts you at a disadvantage, because really, I know research has gone into to look at this, but the developers become blind to their feature sets. They become kind of I don't say lazy, that's not the right word, but they tend to get to a point where they can no longer see the issues. And Orange Games, who we were talking about earlier, is a prime example of how the developers thought, we've done the best that we can. There's nothing else that we can do on that front.
I think one of the things, or at least characteristics behind more QA ops orientated companies, is that there's a complete alignment between QAs and development teams. So QA isn't development, but QAs work very, very closely with the development team, so that testing is done earlier. It's more integrated as part of the process. They're getting the feedback earlier, and it just means you're building a quality application from the ground up, from day one.
Exactly. And if you're ending up using in-house testing and you're not using QA, and you just you have head of marketing like me, I'm not a tester, so do not expect me to provide bug reports and reproducible steps on how developers can fix those issues. And so poor QA coverage, you end up hampering growth, right? So customers don't like bugs. I know that sounds like a silly thing to say, but they really don't, and it really has a massive impact on your ability to grow as an organization.
I think one thing we hear a lot. I remember when I was on sales calls and speaking to our customers and speaking to other people who are looking at QA solutions, was they were one of the solutions that they put in place was, or at least solution with apostrophe marks, was, we'll just get our customers to be the testers. We'll just get the customers to report
They'll be the
bugs.
guinea pig.
Yeah. I'm sure they'll be fine with it. And it's it's like, why would I get my paying customers, people who are buying into my organization, to also be my guinea pigs and my testers?
That's
It
right.
doesn't make sense.
And that's a great example. There's the company that we work with. They split. They're like a roommate, housemate. Split the bills kind of app, and that's exactly what they had done. They would use beta testers exclusively. That's how they'd done all their bugs. The problem is they weren't ready for what would happen if a massive surge of users suddenly sign on. And so the beta testers were, they were regular users of the app. They maybe had 1,000, 2,000 paying customers, and they got featured on Product Hunt, and that of course caused a 10x, 15x growth in their customers overnight. And it literally crashed almost everything about their app. The beta testing service that they had used, they weren't set up to handle that. I think it was pretty informal. They would just had like a WhatsApp group, and they selected their best customers, but they just weren't prepared for that growth. And so they lost out on potentially even bigger growth by being featured in that Product Hunt. And so 34% of users go to a competitor's site if they're not happy with yours. So I know that's me. Specifically, I'll do that. I'm part of that. 44% of users delete a native app if it doesn't work immediately. I do that. I'll download an app, and if it doesn't work the first time, I am deleting that. I've got a 64 gigabyte phone. I don't need to delete that app.
Yeah.
I do it out of principle. I don't know if they're tracking that. They should be. But yeah, if it doesn't work for me, and I assume most people are the same, we'll get rid of it.
I think the average now is that people would download, let's say, an app a month. And so if people are downloading an app a month, and they download yours, you better be on point.
Yeah, it better be good. It better work
correct.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I feel like now it's even like -2 per month. People lose 2 apps a month.
Uninstalling more than I use,
yeah.
for sure. And then 79% of users won't shop with you again if they experience performance issues. So you may lose repeat customers because, and you'll never know. It's not like they're gonna let you know that they had a performance issue and they're not gonna shop again. They just won't use your service or site again. The only exception to that is if you're Amazon, because apparently something mentally happens in your brain if you're Amazon, and it doesn't matter if I have any performance issues, I will go again, which is stupid. So what can you do about it, right? So there's a couple options. You can keep doing what you're doing, which obviously is not a good idea. You can build a QA team, which we're going to talk about why that might not be the best idea either. Or you can do something different, which obviously is what we're here to talk about, which is what you can do differently about the whole thing. So there are some misconceptions of QA. So you don't have to break the bank with QA, and I think that the role of QA is changing, and I think that the idea around what QA does and how it works in the organization is also changing. And I think there's some, in the infographic we're sending to everybody after the event, the webinar today, is that the overall demographic about kind of what QA does and how it contributes to development is radically shifting for every organization that wants to be part of a massive growth kind of trajectory. So conception one of QA, it costs way too much money. We're going to debunk that. It doesn't have to cost too much money, and there are ways that you can scale a QA team without having to just linearly add people to your organization, because that's not effective and efficient. Misconceptions: you can use your own staff to test. You can use your own staff to test, but you shouldn't, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And it's basically impossible to fix the fragmentation issue. So I hear this a lot, that there's way too much fragmentation. It's impossible. We're only going to test on the iPhone 10 and the Samsung Galaxy S8, and that should be enough. The real answer to that is it's not enough, and you have to find a way to test the top devices and also some of the bottom end devices as well. And it's important that we explain why that is, if you want to be a global organization. If you're not interested in being a global organization, you're probably on the wrong webinar. If you're not interested in global growth, you're probably not on the right thing, because it is very easy to, when you're publishing to the Play Store or the iOS Apple Store, to just hit that publish to all countries and hit go. But that's not the best way to approach growth.
And to touch upon the international growth aspect as well, is that, you know, some people on the webinar right now might be asking how QA relates to international growth. But from what we've seen with companies who are releasing multiple times a day in multiple locations, is that they have a different, they have a QA process in place, but the QA process may change a little bit in each location, just because the app may be different, the users are different, and it's important to take all that into consideration. So if you're getting the same testers to test a release in, let's say, France as you are in Australia, the US, the UK, which we know some companies who were doing that, there could be a big issue with that, because those users can't see certain things that users in that market can pick up and notice.
Exactly. I think that's a great point. And before we dive into the next kind of section where we're going to kind of debunk some of these secrets around what QA really talks, we're going to launch another poll, because I love hearing what you guys have to say. And I think it's important that we make sure we tailor our presentation to what you guys need and what you look for in your QA. And so the next poll is really quick. It's going to talk about this. So our current QA looks like this. You either don't do anything formal at all, which is fine. You know, that's what we're here to help. We have a guy or a gal. We have a team of around 5 to 10 who handle it all, or we have a highly functional, agile QA practice, or the last one, it's a mess, which is a fair answer for some companies. So we're going to take just a minute or two. Everyone, if you can just vote in the poll, and we'll come back in just a minute. All right, we've almost got everyone voted here. Just a couple more minutes. If you don't mind taking that poll, we really, really appreciate it, because I think it, helps us deliver really good content for you guys as well. So
it's good to understand what people's challenges are, at least where they see their QA process right now. And if there's anything specific, we've got our emails at the end as well. If you even just want to ask advice on how to improve that QA process, take that to the next step. Even if crowdsourced testing isn't the right fit, from a QA ops perspective, it's still good to understand how we help companies get to the next stage of their QA growth.
Most definitely, exactly. So, we're going to close the poll now, because I think we've got quite a few people who have voted, and if not, that's okay. You might be asleep. I'm okay with that. We're going to close the poll and show the results. So this is interesting. So we've got nobody is not doing anything formal at all, which is fine. 29% of people have a guy or a gal, which is quite normal. I think a lot of people rely on a single point of failure, which is fine. That's how you probably built the organization, is small and grow it out. 14% have a team around 5 to 10 handle it all. Almost half have a highly functional agile QA practice. So we're going to need to get you guys to run the next webinar, because I think that's an interesting thing. But I didn't add the word scalable in here, because I think that's important. I should have added that scalable to that last option.
Yeah, I think even with at least from the companies that we've spoken to and work with now, some of them, Facebook, Spotify, Microsoft, they have agile QA teams. They have teams which work together. Yep. But there are still challenges to get to that next level, whether it's plugging certain gaps or having a right level of browser and coverage across like a device matrix, let's say, or getting onto testing internationally. And so there's still obviously areas there to improve upon and think about, and hopefully we'll be able to cover that for some of the guys who have everything sorted out.
Yeah. I'm also really thankful that 14% of you were honest and said that it's a mess, and that's okay as well. It's okay to be a mess, and that's and I say that it's okay because, like I said, once you peek under the hood, before I joined Global Testing, I thought, man, these apps, I just had this assumption that they got it going on, man. They know they're highly locked down, but I've seen under the hood. I know what's under the hood of, I don't want to call anybody out specifically, but I've seen under the hood of what that looks like for many organizations that I thought, wow, holy moly, if only everybody knew.
If only every app on my phone had as great an app as they do, as great a QA process as that. But that's an assumption that hopefully we can tackle, where we try and help companies who you may think have a really great app, but actually it's really, really messy under the hood.
Yeah, exactly. So the first thing I want to get into is secret number one: QA costs too much, right? So the falsehood here is that the only way to build a QA team is to hire people internally or externally, and that costs money. And you're right, it does. It does cost money. You've got, obviously you've got salaries for people. So, the average QA in the UK is around £40,000 a year, £45,000. I dread to think in San Francisco what it costs, but I actually know that. It's about $120,000, which is insane. But then again, living in...
It's San Francisco.
Yeah, San Francisco is insane. But, I lived in Seattle for many years, and it's just increasing there as well. So I think that for a lot of people, you've got the salary cost, you've got the softer costs around what it costs to hire somebody and their holiday time and benefits and bonuses and the time it takes for them to get kind of up to speed and what they can actually deliver. And I think that you end up being in a situation, at least for a lot of organizations, where you just need to hire more and more all the time, because if your one QA person goes on holiday, which 14% of you have one person doing your QA, or 23% of you have one person doing QA. What happens when that guy goes on or gal goes on holiday? You should let them have time off. You can't work your QA.
Or you can just work them forever and ever and ever, but I don't think they'll be too happy with that.
Most QAs cannot work 24/7. Most. There are a few exceptions. I've met a few of them. So the real truth, QA can be scaled and it can be grown through the use of crowdsourced testers. You don't need to be like DiCaprio here, if you've seen The Wolf of Wall Street, where he's just throwing away money. You don't have to do that. What we recommend is crowdsourced testers. So you've got professional QA testers around the world who have the devices, and we'll get into the fragmentation issue in a minute. But these testers are freelance. They're professional QA. They have tons of experience in all kinds of industry domain and domain knowledge, and they're available to work 24/7 to test your app on whatever device and whatever location and whatever conditions that really you need. We had people testing on the iPhone 8. They were beta testers for the actual device themselves. They had them early, so we were testing for iPhone 8 and iPhone 10 before many organizations had real devices in their hands. And I think we had a request for Android CarPlay. So we asked our crowdsourced testers, anyone have a car with Android Play in it? And sure enough, we've got testers in the crowd that can do that. So if you're not thinking about how your apps are running on all kinds of devices, and whether or not that QA person can do that for you in your organization, I think those are costs that you have to think about as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest approaches with crowdsourced testing is that it's just seen as a much more flexible and a scalable solution. So where companies are using SaaS applications as opposed to and cloud-based applications as opposed to kind of like in-house applications, or applications that let's say were used 10-15 years ago, where you'd have to go in a private hosted cloud or a private hosted network, let's say within an organization. Something which is more SaaS-based is something naturally that people are attaching themselves to because of the quality and the service and the scalability that they need to.
Exactly. So the first problem, problem number 2, my mom can test our app. And that's true, she can. You can use people around the office who can test the app. It's easy, that's true. It is cost efficient, that is also true. And it's fast, that is actually kind of a falsehood. And one of the problems that we find is that this approach delivers a couple things. It delivers missing bugs, right? Because I know that my mom's not going to tell me my app sucks. She's gonna hold back. But the same thing also goes in your organization. If you have your head of marketing testing the most recent version of your app, they are not exploratory testers. They are not professional QA. They are not people that are designed or set up to test. And how are they delivering bugs back to the developers? So there's plenty of organizations we talk to that they use this approach. They test internally. They use their existing teams, and the developers they don't know what the bug is. So the developer spends time tracking down that user in the organization to find out what the bug was, to try and get them to reproduce it on their specific device. So the real truth is that obviously you don't want this guy testing your apps for you, but that's typically what we find people do at the early stage. Using unprofessional testers generates unprofessional results, and that, I think, kind of speaks for itself. If your users are demanding that you have a certain level of QA quality about your application, you certainly want to invest the time and effort to get professional testers on that for you.
I think one thing that people have a misconception around as well that we've seen is that user research isn't functional testing. User research is about gathering certain levels of feedback around how you can improve your application or the user experience to make it easier to allow people to be onboarded easily and or at least buy more, use your application more. Functional testing is very much about eliminating risk, eliminating functional issues, and making sure your application works as well as it should.
Exactly.
And that's only can be done by using professional testers. The other point worth mentioning is around opportunity cost. So think about the opportunity cost of you, a head of marketing at an organization which is growing fast, taking your time away from marketing and putting it onto testing. And the opportunity cost of the developers of chasing up bugs, steps to reproduce, screenshots, crash logs, it all adds up. And that is something which needs to be addressed and needs to be thought about much earlier than just having your development team and your marketing team and whoever else who isn't part of the QA organization.
Or your family.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not too sure they'd be too appreciative of spending their time on QA.
Exactly. My mom's got stuff to do. I'm not going to ask her to test anymore. So don't be this guy or don't have this guy be your tester. Fragmentation is fixable. This is a secret. So I've talked about this. You can't really test on all the devices, so let's just emulate them. I get emails from people all the time that say, well, we have a device farm and we just emulate the devices, which is good enough for us. And it might be from a technical perspective, you might feel like you're getting the actual real experience of the device, but you are not. And I will go into an example of that a little bit later. But the real truth is that there are thousands of testers all over the world who have the devices, the OS combinations, and the network conditions you need. So you don't need to be you don't need to be Ari for those of you who've watched Entourage before. No, you don't need to get angry at your phone and smash it against the wall. You can actually have people that have the required top devices that you're looking for. And this is important. So not all of us have a life-saving app. Not all of us have an app that is, critical to the functioning of human well-being and safety. The top-rated poker game on the Apple Store is important. But when you look at a company like LiveSafe, who we work with, LiveSafe is a company that basically delivers employee safety solutions for other companies. So you send a company to, in this case, we were working with them on sending employees to Concepcion, Chile, and making sure that when they were there, they had access to emergency services, they had access to maps, they had access to all the data that they needed, and to be safe and secure in areas which are not really safe and secure. And you can't do that through an emulator. You literally cannot emulate what the conditions are like in Concepcion, Chile. You can't test to make sure that mobile emergency calls work in that area by using an emulator and an Amazon device farm. You just can't. And so, for LiveSafe, they are literally depending on us to make sure that when they tell their clients that their employees are safe in these places, they have to be spot on. It has to be accurate, and the QA has to work. Otherwise, you're risking people's lives. So, obviously that's a very niche specific application, but I think it goes to show that you don't get the results that you're looking for by using an emulator or a device farm. It just doesn't give you the exact conditions that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched upon it then. Yes, while it can be seen as a niche example, the thing that, at least the misconception that people have around device farms is that, you can get exactly the same. It's, all it is just a device which is put in a different environment, but it is being used by professional testers, and it's being used in an exploratory manner. What I can tell you now is that it's not. What's happening is that there are very specific use cases that a device can go through, but it doesn't take into account a whole range of other things that you mentioned there around, network variations.
Yeah.
But even much more deeper than that, it doesn't allow real testers, to use the application and try and find edge case scenarios.
Exactly.
And we know edge case scenarios happen in every single app right now. So it's a lot bigger than that. And I think that people have that huge misconception around device farms. But don't get me wrong, there's definitely a place for them. It's just about understanding where it fits into your QA strategy, but it shouldn't be your be-all, end-all solution.
Right, exactly. And that's another great example. Promo Pharma is a company that uses us. I know, Fahim, you were intimately involved with Promo Pharma. Why don't you walk us through kind of that, how they came to use us and the benefits that they've experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Promo Pharma, when they initially approached us, they were looking to just essentially test one of their new applications that they just launched. I think it was actually just their very first mobile app on iOS. And they were looking to make sure they could cover a variety of different devices, different versions, and just make sure that it was tested by real people to find real edge case scenarios. And we executed that test for them. They got some really great results. We found some high critical issues that they could fix before release. Now, as we had helped them after that test, it was very much about understanding what is their 12-month QA strategy, what is their long-term QA strategy at least. And for them, they let us know that their release process, their cycle was around 4 weeks. So to wait for 4 weeks in an environment right now where there are companies which are releasing 14, 15 times a day through continuous delivery and continuous integration, it means that you're going to be lagging behind the market if the rest of the market is releasing faster, getting feedback from its users in a much more efficient way. So for us, it was about helping them to release faster, putting into place a much more agile QA process. So a process which allowed them to get results in less than 48 hours, being able to test across a variety of different combinations, use a variety of different real people, real testers in that environment to get results. And through even, I think it was within 6 weeks or so, around 2 to 3 months, their process was already down to 2 weeks. I think right now it's down to about a week, and we plan on helping them to reduce that even further as we speak.
And that's not something that you can do through just ignoring QA, right? You can't reduce the amount of time you spend on development by ignoring QA. Yeah. It has to happen, and it's either happening on the back end later on when there's a ton of crashes and there's a ton of bug issues and it's hampering your growth, or you invest the time up front to make sure that you can grow the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to touch upon this one is it wasn't just the end goal isn't just to reduce the time to 2 weeks, right? There's no completely end goal to that in and of itself. That's a means to an end, right? Yeah. The means to an end there is that they're trying to get feedback from their market faster, and they're trying to grow their e-commerce business quickly, trying to grow revenue. And so if you're able to release faster and get feedback from the market faster and iterate faster, it naturally means that you're more in tune with what the market needs to produce better products, a much better experience for users, and deliver a much greater kind of overview, a much greater e-commerce journey for your customers. And so for them, QA really fueled growth. And that's really how we see QA Ops helping companies to grow faster internationally, worldwide, on a variety of different platforms, and provide a seamless experience for their users and customers.
That's a great point. And so that kind of leads me into what you're going to get if you choose Google App Testing as a QA partner. So this is the period where I talk about what we do, how we do it, and what you get as somebody who uses our services. So we've alluded to kind of this crowd of professional QA testers, but we have access to 20,000 plus global QA professionals. That doesn't really mean a whole lot if you're just kind of recruiting nameless faces to the whole thing. So this is us in Cape Town, this is us in Hyderabad, this is us in Lagos, this is us in Stockholm, this is us in San Francisco. And you see this little logo here that says Testathon. What we do is we do testathons. So we go around the world to all different types of locations, and we hold these testathons, which are like mini hackathons for testers. And that means that we actually know the people in our crowd, we know our testers, we know what they do, how they operate, and we only pick the best to join the actual group that do the testing for you. So this isn't just a mechanical Turk approach to just kind of finding random testers or random people that are willing to test. This is us selecting the best testers so that you get the absolute best quality results for your organization, and more importantly for the customers that use your apps or services, which, as we've talked about previously, is what causes people to either use or not use your services or not come back to your services. You get bug reports in less than 48 hours. So this is a huge one. So if you're using an internal QA team, how many times are you getting your bug reports in less than 48 hours? I would hazard that this is not happening in your organization. There are hardly any organizations I have talked to in 10 months, 11 months now, who have said, man, we get our bug reports in less than 48 hours, so you can't really help us there. If you're not getting bug reports in less than 48 hours, you are losing time and you are losing efficiency in your organization, because your developers have switched on to a new feature, a new function, a new test or code that they're code base that they're working on, and so you are causing massive amounts of context switching, and that causes major amounts of downtime for your developer. I think there's something like it's 4 hours to get
back on track.
To get back on track, yeah, from the context switching. Those are some major costs, and so if you're getting bug reports a week later, 2 weeks after you've submitted the app, and your QA team is not delivering those reports quick enough, then you are certainly in a situation where you're causing pain for your developers.
I think the market is developed to a point now where everyone is looking to become a more kind of, or at least integrate services that incorporate some level of DevOps, of microservices, of being able to release faster. And the reason for that is because the pressure on these companies now to release high quality products at speed is more than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And it's so important that companies think about that and look at ways to address that. And if you're not releasing in at least as 48 hours, as Nick has alluded to there, that's a big time suck for your team, as well as a huge sunk cost and opportunity cost that you're missing out on that could easily be corrected and easily be thought about. The benefits of that are huge, as we've touched upon here. So it's important that companies really try and consider and look at that and understand how they're going to address that immediately if they're not doing that already.
Snapchat released every 13 minutes.
Wow.
Every 13 minutes. It's incredible. I'm not sure how they do it. Bug tracker integrations. So when you use GitLab App Testing, we integrate with all the bug trackers. So Jira, Asana, GitHub, Pivotal, Trello, and even Google Sheets. We have some companies that prefer to get their bugs in Google Sheets, which is fine. But one of the biggest benefits is that all the bugs that you get from us include video recordings, steps to reproduce, and they are all moderated in-house by our own internal cycle managers. So that means that they are here and they are managing each and every one of the test suites and handbags that we do. And so that means that you are only getting the top quality bugs. This isn't just us shoving a ton of volume down your throat and saying, I think this is a bug, I think this is a bug. We're actually verifying each and every one of the bugs and making sure that they fit a certain quality standard and that they have all the things that you need to turn around and fix them as soon as possible.
I think high quality moderation is such a great point you brought up there, just because it's so easy for teams just to say, okay, we'll get all these testers, or internally we'll do all this testing and then we'll just go through those bugs systematically. That is definitely a huge time suck as well, just because it could be that the first 10 bugs are actually exactly the same, or maybe they might not have the right levels of information for you to go about fixing it, and then it goes back onto your opportunity cost. Whereas if you moderate those bugs up front and much earlier in the process, it saves the development team a huge amount of time, and it just means that it's a much more tighter integration, especially with the bug tracker element that you mentioned there, to go from test to release.
Yeah. You also get dedicated customer success managers. So this is Beth. Beth loves Paddington Bear, not Station. She loves Paddington Bear. She wanted me to point that out. She works in our London office right here with us. But she supports QA for some pretty huge Fortune 500 companies that I'm not allowed to name. But they basically, you get a dedicated customer success manager, as well as, cycle managers that work with you as well. And what you'll be able to do is that you'll be really able to release with confidence, reduce the time and effort spent on testing. It's a complete functional exploratory testing and test case execution, and you can run multiple tests at the same time. So that's really unlimited combinations and tracks of mobile devices and combinations and the things that you need. You get 15 to 20 crowdsourced testers on your app delivering you bug reports in less than 48 hours. So unless you have a team of QA of 15 to 20 people globally that are able to give you bug reports in less than 48 hours, you are missing out on major efficiencies in your organization. It's very simple. You sign up for a plan. You onboard with one of our lovely customer success managers. It might not be Beth. I'm just going to point that out in advance. It could be one of our other customer success managers. But special request, if you want Beth, I can see if that works. You give us your APK, IPA, or website, or however you want to do it. And then you get bug reports in less than 48 hours. It really is that simple. And we have 3 basic testing plans: starter, scale, and enterprise. And that obviously is just based on the number of tests and the number of test cases that you need. You can do add-ons, you can do additional packages, one-off tests, that kind of thing. But these testing plans enable you to deliver on the results that you need for your organization and your company. They relieve the pressure for you and make sure that you're able to deliver a product that is released to market with the least number of bugs. With our enterprise plan, which we have quite a few customers on, obviously, we actually have an even faster turnaround time, so 24 to 48 hours. And that's something that our enterprise customers have asked us for, and that we're continuously delivering on. And we're working on reducing these numbers and bringing them down even faster. We have some really cool tech coming up in the future that will enable us to. I don't want to put a time on that because that would be dangerous, but especially because it's recorded and I don't want anyone coming back and saying, that Nick guy, he said this was going to take.
In the near future, though, but just know it's something we're actively working on. We see the market, we see the needs and the demands of what people are looking to do to release with confidence, as Nick has said, and we just want to help people do that in a much broader and a much more scalable way. So that's where all of our efforts are going towards.
Yep. So here's what you're going to get. So if you sign up for a plan before November 30th, you are going to be super happy like Jim Carrey. Excellent movie.
Yes, it
I
is.
just want to throw this gift in here because it just makes me smile. It makes me so happy. If you sign up for a plan before November 30th, we've got some pretty awesome specials. You got a free iPad. So choose a plan. After your second payment, we'll ship you a 64 gigabyte iPad. It's pretty easy. We'll send it to you. You get to choose your color. I think they still do the color choices, but I'll have to verify that. But pretty much, yeah, we'll get you an iPad. We'll ship it to you after your second month. So really awesome. You get a free copy of the new book. So QA Ops, How the Right QA Can Increase Your Speed, Scale, and Global Growth. So this is a new book that we have coming out here in the next 6 months, actually less than that. And really, this is the QA strategy and insights. So the literal strategies from King, Spotify, Dropbox, TripAdvisor, Facebook, Capgemini, many, many more. Includes real-world learnings from interviewing over 200 testers. And then also specific how to implement QA Ops in your own organization for explosive product growth. So these are the exact strategies that we use to take companies from 4-week release cycles down to 48-hour release cycles. These are the strategies we use to help Facebook release and get to their next billion users. And all kinds of different awesome fun facts that you'll find about how QA is changing in the future and how you can be at the forefront of that. You're also going to get a free QA App strategy session. So this is really awesome. Ronald Cummings-John, he's one of the co-founders of Global App Testing, and he's also the co-author of the QA Ops book. He's been a featured speaker at Mobile World Congress, Localization World, Apps World. He's in high demand, and he usually flies. I think he just got back from San Francisco, and he's on his way to Boston, and then oversee MWC, Mobile World Congress in Barcelona this upcoming February. But he has literally had a helping hand in developing QA strategy for Facebook, iHeartMedia, Warner Brothers, TripAdvisor, Spotify, you name it. He's had his hands involved with their QA strategy. And what we're doing is that we're offering a free QA Ops virtual strategy session with Ronald. So if you sign up before November 30th, that's what you're going to get. So really, you get monthly functional exploratory testing, you have monthly test cases, access to 20,000 global testers, dedicated customer success manager. When you sign up before November 30th, you get the free QA Ops book, you have free iPad, free QA strategy planning session with Ronald. It's about $5,326 worth of value, depending on which currency you you subscribe to. Because I'm from the US and that's the currency I'm most familiar with, that's the value that I put on that. What I really want to do is just kind of dive into some questions. I know we got some questions that came through as we were going through the presentation, so I want to make sure that we get that. One of the questions is, how do you know a good tester versus a bad tester? Oh, that's a great question. Fine, what do you think?
Oh, that is a good question. So I think that one of the areas there to think about is the type of characteristics you'd have with a good and a high quality testing organization. So, just from the top of my head, I think that having a close collaboration between developers and QAs is important. So therefore, I'd attribute having my testers to have good communication skills. Being incredibly detail orientated. So if you've mapped out, so at organization level, if you've mapped out the details behind how there's a handoff between developers and testers, and how it goes from a staging environment over to your test to staging to production, etc. I feel like you'd be a detailed orientated department or organization, and if you've got the detail orientation that testers need and require, then you're going to be in pretty good stead if you have that, if you focus on the details and you focus on that.
That's great. That's a super. I think that's a great answer. Next question we have is, how do they know your app? And I'm assuming they mean the testers, but it could be the customer success managers or stock managers.
Yeah, sure. I could take that one. So when it comes to understanding an application, these testers, they, as Nick had kind of alluded to, they're not just testers who we just kind of pick randomly. These are testers that we built relationships with, that we meet in person, that we understand exactly where their domain experience and their expertise lies. So for example, if a tester's had experience testing real estate applications or productivity type applications or education activities or applications for schools, for example, we know exactly where their interest and where their experience lies. We will only select relevant testers for an application to be tested. So it won't just be any random tester who has no experience testing fintech type applications. You don't want to assign people who've tested Tinder and other dating apps to fintech and complex applications, right? You want to have people who understand that application and can provide objective experience and objective results. At the same time, they also can provide different and unique perspectives. So you don't want them to be you don't want testers to be blindsided, but you want to make sure that they have some level of relevance to understand the types of features that need to be tested and just what needs to happen for that test to be successful. What types of bugs typically come up when you have those types of features come together. So it's really important that we have those types of testers. So that's what we really focus on, relevancy. And again, we do this by meeting testers all around the world and logging all the information from our current testers to say, okay, you've tested these types of applications. This is the type of test that we think you're most relevant for.
Nice, excellent. So if you have additional questions, please put them into the questions and answers. We'll make sure that we get to those as well. Just wanted to recap. So if you need to get in contact with us, even if it's not related to the webinar, this is my email address, nick@globalapptesting.com, Fahim at qaapps.com. And we're both available on Twitter, so we are both pretty active on those fronts. We're happy to answer questions on QA, even if it's not related to the overall QA landscape, even if it's not related to the webinar. If you've got feedback for us, if you want to let us know how you've been successful in QA, we're always interested in hearing success stories as well. And we're certainly interested in hearing kind of how you tackle QA as well, because that's always something that we can help share with people. We're super passionate about making sure that people get access to the right QA solutions and strategies for their organization. So as a reminder, if you sign up before November 30th, you could actually have QA results before November 30th, which is crazy. Most people are like, wow, that's literally, if you've got a release coming up, now is the time, because that's how we're going to get that out to you, and you can have those results before November 30th. You get the free QA Ops book, you get a free iPad, and of course the free QA strategy the free QA strategy planning session, say that 5 times fast, with Ronald, and we'll make sure that we get those on the books for you. If you are interested in signing up, I've got a question here, how do I actually sign up? We will have somebody from our sales team reach out to you as well to make sure that we get you onboarded before then. There are obviously only so many customers we can take on at one time, because that makes it hard to get everyone on board at the same time. But we will certainly do our best to get you onboarded and have results before November 30th. Fahim, any additional thoughts? Any final words of wisdom that we can pull from your brain?
I just think the way that QA is going to be going in 2018, right now, I think QA, testing, agile, everything around companies looking to release faster right now is a very exciting space. I think that the tools are catching up. I think the mindset and the processes are catching up. And I think it's important that people understand that you have to be taking this stuff seriously if you're looking to get results in terms of your QA. It's so easy for companies to continue doing what they've always done, but then they always think they're going to get different results. And I think it's something that people always have this misconception around, and it's something that we've seen thousands upon thousands of times, and it's something that we're very passionate about helping people change and realize. And I think that we are we are just on a precipice of a huge change within the industry. And if anyone's got any thoughts around that, feel free to email me. I'd love to discuss that in the future. I think about the future of QA quite a lot, especially with my work in the QA Ops movement in the community and growing that. And expect to hear more about QA Ops in 2018 too.
Awesome. I want to thank everybody for taking their time. I know spending 60 minutes on the phone or listening to myself and Fahim talk is a huge commitment from you, so I am very thankful. And I will make sure that we send out a copy of the slides, copy of the webinar, the white paper I mentioned, the infographic that I mentioned, and like I said, if you're interested in signing up, please get in contact with us as soon as possible. If you can't wait for someone to contact you, you can just email us, or you can contact us, or you can call us, or you can email me, or you can tweet me, or tweet Fahim, or email Fahim. We want to make sure that you guys are set up for the rest of the year. And that is us. We are out. So I want to thank everyone for coming, and you guys enjoy the rest of your day. And, we'll hope to speak with you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.